Hello everybody, welcome back to Wild Wild Wes's Gelvin Valley for Farming Simulator 15. We are, as we have been the past several episodes, busy at harvest of our crop of canola on here. And we have still a ways to go. Looking here at field number 2. Field number 1 is going to follow on its heels, and field number 8, and that's going to leave 18, 25, and 23 left to do. So still a fair amount of the harvest to get through. So that is what our task is here. So we are trying to get through it all as quickly as we can with our expensive, overpriced machinery that we're using in here. It's actually really interesting to do it with the larger machinery. I know we're chowdering through our fields quicker than we otherwise would, but it also is coming at quite a cost. You know, something that I haven't checked in a little while is my sheep. So why don't I put him on hire? I assume it's a him. Let me hop into my menus here. I at least want to make sure. Okay, 55,000. Good, good, good. Has plenty of food. And, you know, I wonder if this will let me teleport myself. Is this approximately right here? This put me. Very, very good. Alright, we're in the general vicinity. Here we go. Oh, awesome. Look at that, guys. Oh, we almost have a full. Okay, we need a full row there. And I believe it'll hold one more row. So we have 2 rows left, and we're going to be hauling ourselves some wool. So that's good to know. I really don't know how much we'll earn for the wool here, but I believe clear up in the upper right hand corner, I don't have my pointer, so I can't point. Just to the right of fields number 20 and 19, you see a little roll of twine, and that is where we take all these fine bits of wool. So coming up, hopefully I'll get through harvest before I have to do that. And good to know that they have plenty to eat. Alright, back to our combine here. We have just a little bit to go. And so I'm going to have to be moving machinery here. I've wanted to spend another episode talking about the train trip that our family took here to do Train Mountain. I kind of gave a general overview in the last one. I don't know if I can fit in everything else here in this particular episode, but we'll see. Hopefully some of you are train nuts, sort of like I am too. And we got just precious little to do. While he's kind of doing this, let me show something here just real quick. Let me get out of game. Alright, I wanted to show a couple maps of this place, and hopefully I'll remember to put a link in the description again. This is Train Mountain Railroad, Southern Oregon, South Central Oregon, and there's just a couple maps to show you. This is a main road that you come in off of Highway 97, the main entrance here. You come in between a couple of beautiful looking cabooses. The main station is kind of right down here that we go to, and all the black stuff that you see on here is track, and more track. So here we saw the safety video. I think I mentioned that. Then the main yard for people like us that come in is starting here. So they had a train up against the curb, and we hopped on it here, and We went through a number of areas here. I won't mention them now. I just wanted to show the sheer volume of tracks that are down here. And you see all these loops and various names for it. I don't know if you can zoom in and see the names. Like I say, if you check out the links, you can see for yourself all the names that are on here and the routing of the track. But ultimately, it goes under the road here called the North Portal, and this is where it heads out to some of the longer tracks. And for that, of course, I mean, this is the south side map. They have a north side, and if you zoom out, I think these are on 11 by 17 sheets of paper if you print them. But the North Portal is down here by my cursor. So you head up in here, and ultimately we had a picnic up here. I think I mentioned that in the previous video. So they don't have near as much track out here. Well, that's a misnomer. They have just as much track, but it isn't as busy. You see here there's 2 lines. Here's 2 lines kind of coming out. Here's a few different ones. It tends to be longer bits of track, and so I just wanted to show that. I'm going to talk through some of it as I continue sharing about kind of what we did that today. And I don't know if anybody listening is anywhere close to Oregon or where I live, but if you're interested in miniature trains, this is definitely a place to check out. So and you can see the scale here. 1 inch is 750 feet, so you kind of get some idea. There's a few miles here in distance in real life terms. All right, back to our game to see what our combine's doing. Oh, well, our combine, as it were, is attempting to... Oh, good gracious. You just as well not leave the fellow, because this is what you are left with. And he decided to go across the fence, and I may have to literally reset it. Oh, goodness gracious. Yeah, see, now he's just embedded in the fence. Well, I think what I need to do is a reset. I'll be back. Alright, we're back. And we hadn't gone very far. So I just decided, I didn't even save progress as to where we were. I figured we would just do it over. And the app would ultimately be quicker than having to try to reset the combine, drive it back, or fiddle with the save game or that kind of thing. Kind of an annoying thing to have happen, but you know what? It's in par for the course in here. There is some strange attraction that these combines have to Wild West's fences, and they seem insatiably desire to steer toward them as soon as you turn your back. You just never know what they're going to be doing. Anyway, we're back doing the job ourselves like a boss. So anyway, I showed just before all this kerfuffle kind of the maps, if you will, of the miniature railroad called Train Mountain. And last time I kind of talked about the place as a whole. And so this time I wanted to try to just share a little along the route. I think last time I mentioned we got in the air 9:30-ish, and the first order of business was to see a safety video. Of course, they're going to want you to do that. They want you to sign paperwork where you say, if anything bad happens, we won't sue you. That's essentially what I call that kind of paperwork. One of those sign your life away. It's not as if we're playing with anything too dangerous. Probably the most dangerous thing, we encountered, and I should have recognized it, right when we got there. I noticed when we parked our family vehicle, there was a whole bunch of yellow jackets swarming around the front end of the vehicle, and I have no idea what they were doing up there. There wasn't a nest nearby that I could tell. They were just kind of a bunch of them up there. And when I say a bunch, I'm talking maybe 25 of them. And, it's noticeable. Nobody likes stinging insects, and so when you see a horde of them kind of lurking around, it kind of makes you sit up and take notice. But we weren't going to stay there for very long. Like I say, we had to head in and see the safety video. When we got done with the safety video, we headed back to the track, right in front of the main central station. They had a train kind of pulled up to the curb for all of us to ride on. And so we kind of stowed some of our belongings there. We could take a little bit with us. Mainly all we took, was maybe a water bottle and our cameras or whatever. So not much. You couldn't take much with you. But very soon, right at the start, we kind of got a picture of the protocol, if you will, for their train operations. And maybe it was similar back in the day. You maybe don't see it this way anymore, but each of the air trains have to have both an engineer and a conductor. And the engineer, of course, is responsible for driving the train, operating the train. And the conductor's responsibility is for objects on the train, namely, primarily the passengers themselves. So the way they had it set up is the engineer, of course, had to be close to the train, so that person was up front, and the conductor always sat in the rearmost position on the train, almost as if, they had a caboose or something. And they operated with a whistle system. So the train has its own horn. Even if it wasn't a steam train, some people are such into the hobby, they have a full-on steam train. This one wasn't a steam train, but we closed I guess we did close it. But they all are equipped, with horns so they can sound, because when they go over a road, where there's crossing arms and everything, they do have to sound that they are coming through. So, go back to this over here. So the train, in order to go, the sequence that they would have is when the engineer was ready to take off, they would make two notes on the horn, honk, honk, and then the conductor, before the engineer would move, they would wait to hear the conductor's answering two toots. And the conductor, of course, didn't have a train thing or whatever, but he had a whistle. And so the conductor would check to see that all arms and legs and whatever was stowed properly on the train, and would whistle twice, 2 bursts, and then that would signal to the engineer that it was safe to go. And probably if the engineer was smart, all they would do is turn around and look, to make sure, probably for their own liability's sake, because everything was open air or whatever. So we kind of got a picture that was their operating procedure, and so we headed out on a train. And you may recall, you may not, from the map, that I just showed you, you initially head south, and they show you, they have I guess it's called a roundhouse, even though there really isn't a house. It's kind of a circular area, if you will, where many, many locomotives, trains can all be parked kind of at the same time. And they have a turntable in the middle, where you can grab a particular train or whatever that you want from that circle. And we weren't there on a day, where they had just loads of trains operating all at the same time. Oh, man, I think I should have been on here. Now, did I get that right? Unlock, load. All right. I think I have it, and let me haul this down over the hill. Get this going. I probably should have just headed on down through the field. That would have been about as close. But oh well, we're going downhill, so it shouldn't matter too much. So they took us by there initially, and kind of around the back side of the main building. And periodically, the engineer would stop, and she would tell us about various sights to see, if you will. So one of them, of course, was the turntable thing that they had. Then they took us out north, and she pointed out all the equipment that was sitting on the grounds. This is old, real-life size rail equipment. I'm not sure they had a consistent era. Let's just say it was old equipment that someone had donated sometime back in the day. Some of it was for removal of snow, for example, on the tracks. And so the beauty of those, we saw those on a previous trip. You could climb up inside it and kind of take a look around, pull levers if you wanted. Frankly, I'm surprised they'd let you go inside it. It seems like a lot of that stuff, would just deteriorate, with that kind of beating over time, if you will. But yeah, that's what they chose to do. So, all right, let's get the combine down there. So she paused there. She took us to the northern end of the main entrance area and showed us. I mean, it's really interesting too. I mean, the crossing. There was a crossing over the main road coming in, and this rail crossing is just like the real life size ones. There's an arm that comes down. There's sound. You hear the tinking of it, and there's lights flashing, and vehicles would literally have to stop to wait till these miniature trains, cross the main roadway. So we got through there, and then she paused one other time, and kind of there's a picnic area she showed us, with some other rail equipment that they had out there. Really a cool area, even just in its own right, with stuff to see, emphasizing that they are a museum. So a lot of these other exhibits, kind of come with the experience. We also kind of circled around. There's an enormous yard that they had with even more tracks, and there's a whole separate building, and she was describing it has all sorts of mechanical equipment in it, maybe even metal working equipment for people who are skilled, in those kinds of things, where they could fix their trains, repair them, maintain them, so forth and so on. And really just yard space. Like I say, when we were there, there weren't that many trains, not that many visitors, but there are times of the year where they have meet, and there are literally hundreds of trains that are out and about on the track, and of course all of these need their own slot, to stay. So really cool just to see all that, and everything, of course, is switched just like normal trains. So just kind of seeing how all that works. So we kind of circled around the northern end of the property. We kind of cut back, and it's built on a hill. So when you look at the map, you may wonder, well, why did they build the track the way they did and lace it kind of across the area, with seemingly no purpose? And all I can say is it's built on a hill. There's a reason, they did that, because they were working with the ground contour and, trying to just make it so that there was a reasonable grade that they could take these trains kind of up and down the hill. All right, let me see. Can I get the tractor kind of out of the way? I think that'll work as long as we don't have any flood. All right, let's see if we can get him through the gate and head on into here. Like I say, I'm enjoying, I know I mentioned this several episodes ago, I'm enjoying doing this with crop destruction on, where if I put my tire tracks in the wrong place, they will destroy the crop, and so I have to be extra careful as I drive through here that I don't do that. And as always, the outer round is the more challenging round because we're dealing with the edge of the field that is not flat, and so yeah, it's kind of giving me a little bit of fits here. Come on. Yeah, I think the smaller combine just handles it better. There we go. Yeah, I gotta be careful I stay out of the fence here too. Anyway, the tour continued. She took us kind of on around, and I think it was over the top of the entrance to the northern area of the property, and she circled us around. I mean, because that's how the track routed her, but she paused one last time to show us they have, I think I mentioned this in the last video, where everywhere I look at this place, all I see is work. A boatload of fun, to be sure, but work, to maintain and take care of the property. And so she was talking a little about it. Every spring, once the snow melts off and everything, they have crews that will go out and pick up pine needles off of the tracks and pine cones, and they need a place to dispose of this. And so she was showing us kind of their, not really a garbage dump, it's more maybe compost, if you will, where they put all the pine needles. And I neglected to ask her, I'd be really curious to know if the hauling of these pine needles, if they use the actual train itself to do it. That'd be so cool. And you talk about making a work task a little more fun. Why not use the motive power of the train itself to haul the junk away? So you're out on the route wherever you are, and you pick up the pine needles, and someone puts them in the back, and you're driving the train to take the needles to the place where you dump them, and so somebody's running the trains to haul that out there, versus using other equipment. Now, probably using other equipment would be way more efficient. When I say other equipment, I mean like taking a truck, a real life-size truck, out in the brush, where they can pick all this stuff up and then haul it in there. But I forgot to ask her if they use the trains. Because there's other tasks, and I know I've seen some of these other miniature railroads out there. When you're laying new track, for example, and just like a real railroad, they got railroad ties, they have the rail, and once they have that down on the proper grade, they put in ballast, mainly, I think it looked like pea gravel. Well, I remember seeing one of these places that had one of these, a backyard miniature railroad. He used the train equipment itself to haul the ballast out to where it needed to go. He had a working, what would you call that, a hopper car, where you could put the gravel in and you could trip a toggle something that would open it in the back and dump it over the rails. Now, you still had to, expend some effort to smooth it out and everything. But what a way to enjoy your train while you're doing some of the work, to put it together, if you can literally use the train itself to haul the ballast. Oh, it doesn't like this hill. Kind of crab walking up the hill. Header's a little wide. Yeah, my contract is ending, whatever. I better pay attention how much I have in here. Okay, we're only 50 some. Maybe I'll end up holding most of this field just in a single tank load here, if I get close. So she showed us that, and you know, in the old days, they used to burn the pine needles, and I guess, you know, they don't do that anymore. You know, there'd be a time of year. Some of that, I don't think it's literally illegal, but I think that to be good neighbors with whoever else is around, I think we were told they really despise the smell, you know, the smoke that would be there in the spring or whatever when they're burning up all these wet pine needles, you know, that have sat under the snow. And you know, all of us know when you burn something that's a little wet, it's going to smoke like crazy. So now I think they just dump them in the pit, and you know, I guess they didn't talk about this part. I would guess, you know, if they're going to try to get them to disintegrate, you know, they may try to help it along by some means. Not sure just what, but there are means to help things compost quicker, if you will. And then after that, we headed for the North Portal, and you know, this was charting new territory for us. You know, previously we'd been in the area, we'd kind of seen some of this, and now, you know, we'd never been through the North Portal, and it's interesting, you know. She also mentioned a little about that. You know, they do have bridges on the place, and bridges designed to hold these miniature trains, plus the people and whatever they're carrying. And they had talked to the county a long time ago, way back in the day, you know, when they were making this. And so there was just, as you might imagine, tons of red tape, you know, by the county saying, okay, you want to do what? You want to build a bridge over... They initially had thought about building a bridge on the road or something to go over the top of the rail, or to make a rail bridge over. Anyway, none of that came to fruition. What they ultimately decided to do was to bore a hole under the road, and who knows what kind of permits they had to go through for all that. I can only imagine. But bore a hole under the road. They put a massive culvert. I don't even know how big it was, but big enough to hold these trains. You know, big enough that you could stand up inside. Even a very tall person could walk comfortably in there. And I think they had, was there 2 tracks going in there? I don't remember exactly. It might have been double tracks, so fairly wide too. But it goes under the regular county road, you know, that you would drive on to come into the place in the first place. And interestingly, with all the property that they had, the best place they had for a portal to go under the road actually emptied out on someone else's private property. So, see, this is where I'm probably destroying crop. Let me see here. Yep, there's destroyed crop. Alright, let me go get my truck. This one, I am taking out the lower door, or gate rather. Let's see if I can get out here. I think I came in here, so should be able to go out. And I may have mentioned this in my last video, but it's just interesting some of the real life issues that they have. Well, I mean, it's all real life, but real railroad issues, if you will, that they have even with a little railroad. With a lease, you know, when they, you know, if a railroad, they don't do this very often anymore, but if they were putting in new track and there was a certain area that the track had to go, oh, I guess my combine's over here. What they would end up doing is buying or leasing property so that they could put their track, you know, where it had to go. And they might have to pay a pretty penny in order to do that. So I have no idea what the arrangement is here. this is shooting from the hip. I mean, I'm just guessing they probably don't have to pay a cent to rent the track. Just having been through the air, I'm assuming that they maintain the track, they take care of it, and they probably let the private party that's there also use the track. See, that's the other thing, that's going on here is this private land that they went over happened to be another miniature railroad. I mean, that's what's just fascinating about this. Who would guess there was... There's a bell. I'm gonna have to do some other episodes. Who would ever guess that there would be two of these such miniature railroads, right in the same area? So this one here looks like, just a mom and pop operation, if you will. And so, yeah, however it is, for a short distance, not too far, they are on someone else's property, a neighbor that has their own little railroad. I think this one's called Timberlake Railroad, something like that. And so they lease the track kind of through that area before it heads off to the north on the majority of the 2,200 acres, the Train Mountain owns. It just fascinates me, that they access the property, because all the parcels, of course, aren't adjacent, and they chose to access it in the way that they did, which kind of interjects some real life railroading into the equation. The office where I work, we used to have, and actually we did some work for a local short line railroad, and I seem to recall some of the work had to do with leases on a lot of crossings and everything. It must be a major headache for railroads, but it's all part of just maintaining their right-of-way and their ability to do commerce kind of, over the line. Anyway, the bell has rung, so I think we'll call the episode there. We are, like I said at the get-go, working busily away on our canola, and right now I have trains on the mind, and it may take another episode or two before I get through everything I'd like to share, so hopefully I'm not boring anybody more than usual. Y'all have a wonderful day. Thanks for stopping by, and I will see you on the next one. Goodbye.